Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining. We're going to make a start. People are currently still joining, but we're recording the session. So you will get a copy of the session afterwards and also a copy of our slides as well. So thank you all for joining. What I'm going to do is run through a few highlights from this year's APMA State of the Affiliate Nation. And then we will we'll have an open discussion with a few members from the APMA about some of their highlights and some of the deeper dives into some of the data. So I've got quite a bit of content to get through. So without further ado, let's start. So before I do just start, I just wanted to, presumably, given that you found this webinar, you're aware of the APMA, but I just wanted to let you all know what the APMA is. So the Affiliate and Partner Marketing Association is a not-for-profit organisation made up of companies within, obviously, our industry who have common interests and goals. We sit at the heart of the industry and we try and put forward a collective view, and we act as an industry voice as well. And one of the key things that we try and do is provide insights into statistics. And this research is the second year that we've done it, and that very much sits at the heart of that aspect of what we do. So we launched our first report in October last year. It was slightly late in the year, but we decided that we wanted to have a benchmark for 2024, and we also collected, for 2023 data, and we also collected previous 2 years' data as well. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to do the exercise earlier in the year. So we wanted to collect the data for the calendar year 2024, so that we had it ready as early in the year as possible. Obviously, it helps with kind of future planning around Black Friday, etc., which obviously we know is coming up soon. So today we're launching 2025's report, and just to give you a little bit of insight into the methodology about how we do it. So we hire an independent consultant, independent researcher, and we reached out to all of the major networks and platforms. And this year we had 12 networks and platforms who submitted data. We asked them a series of questions, predominantly all quantitative data questions, and some of the questions are compulsory. So we try and collect everything that is top level so that we have at least an overview. And then some of the data, which is slightly trickier to get on a more granular level, it's sometimes more partial data, but we'll come on to talk about that a little bit later. We also collected data for eBay, and we modeled data for the Amazon Associates program, because typically Amazon Associates numbers are difficult to come by. And within the remit of this report, we focused in on what I would label core affiliate marketing. So we didn't go out to the parallel industry of gaming or gambling. We didn't really target lead gen companies as well. However, if any of that activity is captured by the networks that we ask for data, then it will be within this data set. We also didn't collect agency fees as well. Now, we know that agency fees can add a significant chunk of revenue in terms of spend onto the numbers, and it is something I'm conscious of, and it might be something that we look to do next year. We have 10 current members who are agencies of the APMA, and that will be a conversation that we have with them. And we did reach out to some companies that declined to give us that data, their data, and so we chose not to model their numbers because we didn't really feel like the additional revenue would be material in that it would move the numbers considerably. So without further ado, I'll come on to talk about, if you're at PhillyFest, some of these slides will be familiar. However, we do have new slides in here, so there are new insights. So hold on if you were at a PhillyFest a couple of weeks ago. So our headline stat is that £1.7 billion was spent on the affiliate channel, and that is by brands. So that's advertiser spend. And by spend, what we mean is we mean everything. So fees that are paid to networks, tenancies, as well as all your classic commissions, last click CPA payments. So we collected that as a gross figure. We did ask the networks if they would provide net figures for us. However, the data set we received wasn't large enough for us to be able to extrapolate useful information from it. So when we talk around kind of things like the cost of acquiring customers, what we're talking around is not CPAs necessarily, but cost per sale, CPS. So to give you some other stats, so you may have seen that the IAB released their ad spend survey a couple of weeks ago. In their ad spend survey, they also separate out the affiliate data. And one of the reasons they do that is because within ad spend, they don't collect the commission data that we know is so important in terms of us being able to quantify the size of the industry. They only received submissions from 5 networks. We received submissions from 12. So that meant obviously we were going to record and report on a significant additional amount of revenue. And I think this is one of the reasons that the trade association, the APMA, is important, because otherwise, without us doing this piece of work, that nearly £500 million worth of spend is just lost and is just not acknowledged by the wider digital marketing industry. So what did we see in terms of that spend year-on-year data? So we recollected the data for 2023. We knew that the numbers would be marginally different. As it transpired, one of the companies that supplied the data accidentally supplied their global data to us. So we had to remodel all of 2023's data, which is why, if you're thinking that 1.7 feels very familiar to the data that we released last year, it's because we've restated it from a lower position in 2023. So we did see growth, but the overall figure from 2024 is similar to 2023. Just a few other kind of big numbers for you here. So that equates to around about 362 million sales across the whole of 2024, which obviously, if you can do sort of fairly basic maths, you'll see it's around about 1 million sales are recorded every day. And that growth in terms of transactions very much aligned with the growth in spend. So we saw a 9% growth in that spend as well. In terms of revenue capture, so this is what's captured in the baskets for brands. The figure was 19 billion, so just shy of 20 billion this year. But again, with those restated numbers, we were able to report growth, but from a slightly lower position. So our year-on-year revenue growth grew by 5%. So does that mean that sales are becoming more expensive? That's something that we will come on to talk about in our conversation in a bit. Now, I included these slides when I presented about the 2023 numbers last year at PI Live. And one of the reasons for it is I think that very often we become a bit number blind. And there's a very, very significant difference between 1 million and 1 billion. So 1 million seconds is 11.5 days effectively, but 1 billion seconds is close to 32 years. So if that kind of helps to contextualize that when we talk about 19 billion, we're talking about a significantly higher number than the millions that we typically talk about when we're talking about larger programs or individual companies. In this 60-minute webinar that I have your attention for today, we will probably, the affiliate industry will probably track more than 2.2 million, because that's averaged out across every hour, across every year, including, you know, the night when people aren't necessarily shopping. But if we average that out, then 2.2 million pounds will be tracked through affiliate links. And that equates to around 12 seconds for every second of every day across the whole of last year. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive now into some of the data. So that brand spend, how did it disseminate across the different sectors? So this year, what we wanted to do was collect slightly more granular data. So last year we focused in on kind of top level data, but this year we asked for a combination of data. So we asked for brand spend by sector, we asked for transactions by sector, and we asked for revenue by sector. But we then also asked for that by affiliates, and we then also asked for that by affiliates and by sector combined. So to give us a kind of a much more granular insight as to what's happening at a sector level and from a benchmarking perspective. So it's not surprising that retail dominates. Close to 50% of brand spend is going through retail programs. We know that they account for the vast majority of affiliate programs, and then mass market as well. So, you know, they're reliant on repeat customers in a way that potentially travel and finance isn't. So brand spend continues to sort of, you know, be dominated by retail. Down slightly in terms of market share, obviously up year on year, but down slightly from 49% last year. ROI is something that we know remains one of the channel's greatest strength. We saw a marginal drop in terms of ROI. Again, going back to the earlier slide where I said that revenue collected by brands had increased by a slower rate than spend, and that's been reflected naturally in the ROI. But it still remains really compelling. In the full report, we talk around benchmarking against Meta and against Google and against other channels as well as what's considered to be a decent ROI. And all of these figures are comfortably higher than that. And we know that it remains one of our greatest strengths, although sometimes I feel it's kind of can be a bit of an Achilles heel for us because we focus in on the numbers rather than the stories. So I think that we need to do a combination when we're storytelling around, yes, the performance element is very, very strong, but the storytelling needs to come through in terms of sort of capturing people's hearts and minds about the power of the affiliate channel. So I wanted to just give you a few additional little stats here. So around 1 in 10 pounds that is spent within retail online in the UK is now flowing through an affiliate link. It's actually just shy of 1 in 10, but given that our estimates, our numbers are probably slightly on the conservative side, if we factored in the chunks of revenue that we're not currently collecting, it's probably very much bang on 1 in 10 pounds that is coming through an affiliate link. 1 in 7 pounds that is spent on online travel is coming through an affiliate. Now, this was something that we didn't really pay much attention to last year. Obviously, travel's been recovering, but actually we found some data that showed how much generally consumers spend in the UK on online travel. And it's around about 36 billion pounds a year in 2024. And we tracked around 5 billion pounds worth of revenue through the affiliate channel, just through going out to those 12 companies. So again, really significant, and an even more significant share than we're seeing through retail. And then what about Black Friday? So one of the data points that I was really keen to capture is we know that affiliate marketing is incredibly well set up to capitalize on Black Friday. It really aligns with what consumers expect around that peak trading period. And so we asked networks if they would submit the 4-day weekend, the cyber weekend, the bookmarked weekend from the Friday to the Monday inclusive. And we used some publicly available data as to how much from Adobe, which is how much was spent in that 4-day period. And then we did a calculation based on the amount that we captured. And again, we estimate it's about 13%. So if you think that that will obviously be dominated by retail, if you think retail is 10% the rest of the year, that accelerates to 13% across the Black Friday weekend. Again, really underlining and underpinning and hopefully providing some ammunition when affiliates are going out and starting to talk to brands over the coming months about planning for Q4. So where are we seeing growth within our top affiliate types? So these are our top 3 that we saw. So CSS, Google Comparison Shopping Services, grew by 14%, coming in at 3rd place. Subnetworks, 18% up. And tech partners 26% up. And again, we won't go into the detail now, but we will come onto the detail when we're having our general discussion. However, 2 affiliate types, we did see a decline in the brand spend. So vouchers was down by 7% and price comparison by 4%. Some people may be surprised when they look at the market shares that we see within the report, that vouchers only accounts for around about 10% of spend, and that has declined year on year. But as I say, we'll come on to talk around some of the issues why that might be, and how that could be linked to the growth of subnetworks as well. So these were our top affiliate types that we modeled to our own taxonomy. We asked networks to fit their data around our own taxonomy, and we tried to keep it quite top level. So we grouped some affiliate types together, and here you can see the change, the percent in year-on-year change in spend. And you can see that that cashback loyalty content creators pretty much benchmarked in line with what we saw as general industry growth. Now, I mentioned that voucher codes account for 10% in terms of spend. There is a really interesting conversation to be had around affiliate classification. So we asked the question that rather than saying what percent of revenue or brand spend went through voucher code sites, we asked the question instead, what percent of your sales were the result of a voucher code being redeemed? And this was from a partial data set, but it was still a meaningful data set. And actually, it was close to 1 in 4. So it raises that whole conversation around classification, which is what is a voucher sale? If a blogger generates a sale that is reliant on a code being redeemed, is that a voucher sale or is that a blogger sale? And again, it kind of really, as I say, feeds into that conversation around how classification in our industry really is probably about time that we address that, to address the shortcomings of our classification. Something else we wanted to address as well was the amount of revenue or amount of brand spend that is going through non-last click CPA activity. So what do I mean by that? So we typically obviously think of ourselves as a performance-based channel, and we think of ourselves as a last click CPA channel. However, we've known for years that brands are spending a lot more additional revenue, a lot of revenue through things like CPC deals, through tenancies. And so we wanted to capture everything else. So we didn't separate that out. We just captured non-last click CPA and last click CPA. And we bucketed those two things. And what we found is that around about 1 in 7 to 1 in 8 pounds is actually being spent on what we would consider non-CPA activity. That could be hybrid activity, a combination of CPC, CPA. And again, I think this makes a really interesting conversation about why that might be, because it did grow. It didn't grow by a huge amount year on year, but we're definitely seeing the direction of travel being that this is increasing year on year. And how does that reframe both the industry and how we talk to brands about the power of affiliates to deliver branding as well as acquisition? So that's all I'm going to cover off today. There are some additional insights you can get from our free report that is available from the APMA website to download. We have a 59-page report as well, which we are charging for this year, but again, that's available from the website. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come on to talk to our panel. So joining me today, we have Carla Arundel from Optimize, Rachel Side from Genie Goals, who, Rachel, are you on the call? Rachel was running late because she was herring back from a client meeting, but she's on the call. That's great. And we've also got Anne Clements from Connected Path as well. So welcome to all three of you. Thank you for joining me today. So what I wanted to do, we've got a series of questions that we wanted to cover off from some of the insights that are in the wider report, as well as some of the things that we've talked about today. So what I wanted to do was just kick off with a pretty straightforward question. Anne, I'll come to you first, which is, for you, what is the one key highlight from this year's report?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. You're all very welcome. I mean, to me, I think growth in spite of scale, and also the maturity of the industry. Now, more than 20 years old, 1.6 billion, and yet still growing at 9% overall. And I think if you think start of 2023 to the end of 2024, so over the last 2 years, I think the UK economy has grown like, 1%, if that. And those stats come from the government, so they're certainly not to be trusted as much as ours are. And in that time, affiliate marketing has grown 16%. So I think this is still a very, very powerful growth story in a pretty challenging economy. And overall, I think that's the big takeaway for me.
Rachel?
Oh, also 16 billion clicks tracked in affiliate marketing, which I worked out as 500 clicks a second, even in 2024, which was a leap year. That's pretty cool.
Rachel?
Hey, yes, I'm here, fresh out of Slough, made it. Hopefully you can hear me okay because I missed the sound test.
Yep.
So for me, it was seeing the scale of things, seeing that, it's 10% the affiliate channel makes up of sales, but seeing that there's still room for that to grow, and with the number of retailers out there that still aren't engaging in the affiliate channel. As an agency this year, we manage affiliates, PPC and paid social, and we've seen a real influx of retailers turn into the affiliate channel, and actually interestingly, like kind of more inbound and more retailers wanting to do affiliates than what we're having discussions about other channels at the moment, which I think is really interesting and shows that there's still, for a mature industry, still a lot that we can do, and a lot of retailers who haven't really explored it and haven't done that much in it yet.
It's interesting you say about the number of brands, because we actually asked those 12 networks to tell us how many brands that they had that were active, how many advertisers, retailers they had that were active. And actually, when you compare it to the volume of e-commerce sites that are actually out there that could be running affiliate activity, it's way less than 10%. So the scale and opportunity, but also the power within what we currently collect from quite a small subset, yes, very large retailers, but the SME opportunity is obviously huge as well in terms of growing that amount.
Absolutely. And for us, one of the big reasons that they're kind of looking to affiliates now, and this is generally the most common reason, is diversity of channels and not wanting to be reliant on one or two channels anymore, wanting to kind of future-proof. And affiliates has become the kind of next one to turn to look at how they can either revisit if they've done it before, or scale what they're doing, or launch it, which I think is exciting. It's exciting that we're having those conversations and that people are kind of I want to say like falling a bit back in love with it. I think from my chats.
Carla?
Well, I think it's tricky to choose one because there are lots of pertinent points that I think perhaps were slightly surprising or certainly showing trends that we hadn't seen before. But if you're going to push me and force me to choose just one, I think considering, I mean, this actually wasn't in the short deck that you've shared just now, Kevin, but if you're able to look at the full report, you'll see that there's a bit of comparison around the size of the affiliate channel against the IAB's digital ad spend and some of the other channels in the broader digital marketing mix. And in the excerpt included in the report, it's fascinating to see that affiliate is larger than investment that's being given to channels like digital out of home, which we know has been growing exponentially. And so that to me was a really key takeaway, because I think what it does is evidences how seriously the channel is being taken now, how it is becoming a integral part of the marketing mix and less so an afterthought or a secondary consideration. And that feels like a bit of a vindication in terms of, you know, the channel has grown up, the channel is effective, the channel is recognized as being critical for brands that want to effectively manage a kind of a full marketing mix. And so that to me is very encouraging. I think that's kind of integral to, you know, the work that the APMA is channeling and championing, but also speaks to how effective we all know the channel is, but that understanding and interpretation exists brand side as well. I think that's a really strong statement.
It's interesting you mentioned that point, because every year I look at the ad spend survey, and every year we never get mentioned. And as I say, one of the reasons for that is because they don't capture commission, and they refuse to capture that commission, which is why they went out and we did the separate survey with them. We did a really big survey 10, 11 years ago. However, in this year's, what they typically do every year is they obviously pick out certain trends, certain growth areas, and obviously retail media is kind of on everyone's lips at the moment, right? And actually, I would anticipate that retail media will be larger than affiliate last year, given the kind of exceptional growth rates it's seeing. But for the time being, at least, we can say that we're a larger industry than retail media in the UK.
Yeah. And isn't that an excellent soundbite? You know, I think that's a real testament to the strength of the channel.
And also, there's going to be a lot of dovetailing, right? Because a lot of people within the affiliate industry will think about how they can bring retail media elements within the channel as well, which is what we do, right? We simulate all of these other digital channels within one. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Okay, so what I want, incidentally, if you wanted to ask a question, I will try and keep an eye on them, but I'm not very good at multitasking. There's a link there where you can ask questions, or you can ask them in the chat as well. And I'll just say, I'll try and keep an eye on them and ask the panel as they come in. So I wanted to cover off some of the points that we talked about in the slides. And given, Carla, your experience predominantly within finance, and Rachel, the kind of work that Jeannie does, particularly around CSS as well, more generally as a company, I wanted to understand kind of where some of the trends that are relevant for kind of your client mix or your product portfolio. So let's talk about some of the affiliate trends that within that report or within that slide. So we saw big growth for CSS, sub-networks, and tech partners. So kind of, I'll leave it up whoever wants to go first, but why do you think we're seeing growth from those three particular types?
Well, I mean, I'll jump in with tech partners. So they were the model that showed the biggest amount of growth year on year. And I think from our perspective, in terms of the work that we do with finance brands, within that tech partner category, we're including fintech partners. So those that offer perhaps a kind of a soft search credit scoring functionality for consumers. And so we've seen an exponential increase in how those particular models are growing. And I think it's partly because consumers, given the economic backdrop, cost of living crisis, you know, there is a kind of a clear motivation for customers to be finding new and I suppose useful finance products. So things like credit cards tend to peak in these kinds of economic challenging times. And then equally, we've seen a big proliferation of things like switcher offers within current accounts. And so within that tech partner piece, we know that the finance model has definitely had an influence. And I think what's been really interesting to see is how there's kind of been a three-stage drive to that growth. So partly it's about consumer appetite. You know, customers want more products that are either supporting or benefiting any cost of living issue. So if there's a switcher offer for a current account that gives you £185 cash back, which isn't unheard of, then that's something that customers will go for. I think we've equally seen an increasing adoption of technology in that space by some of the bigger traditional banks. So they're using things like pre-approval APIs and criteria, so that it's enabling them to offer customers a guaranteed product or rate within the media that the tech partner owns. And they're also using a process of kind of pre-population. So given that a customer engages with that fintech site, providing consented data around what it is they're looking for, some of that data can be securely used by the brand that the customer chooses to buy from in order to pre-populate an application, which rapidly increases conversion rates. So I think this evolution or greater adoption of technology by some of the banking brands and how the fintech partners support that is really increasing the kind of acquisition we're seeing in that space. I think the final piece of the puzzle is that some of those tech partners are also broadening out the product sets and the channel mix that they operate. So traditionally, credit cards was a focus, and that was the single product offering, but that's broadening out to include things like current accounts and loans and mortgages, etc. So I think that's probably a trend that we'll continue to see over time, depending on how the economic backdrop evolves. But it's a really fascinating space, and definitely one to watch.
Great.
Yeah, so CSS, I really feel that the boom in CSS is a few different things, but from, I guess, Jeannie's side and also from my side when I'm talking to retailers, I feel like there's been a huge education piece on it as well. I think retailers understand it a lot more, and it's easier to talk about a lot more than it was historically. I also think in the channel, there's a real need sometimes for that new efficient sale driving partner, and that partner that could come in and actually drive revenue in a really key and efficient way, especially in retail. When we were even talking to retailers, say even like a year, 18 months ago about CSS, there was so much more nervousness around it affecting their PPC activity, around how to integrate it into a program. But I think the adoption of it, more big retailers doing it, has shown that it is possible to make it a really key partner on a retailer's programs. It's shown that you can do it alongside your PPC activity in a really efficient, non-competitive way. And I think it's actually a proof of concept. It is growing, it is driving really valuable revenue for retailers. And one of the things that we found really super powerful at an agency when we're discussing introducing CSS onto a new program is particularly trying to talk about the role that CSS plays. I think it is an incredibly conversion driving partner, but actually it sits much more up the funnel, in my opinion, in terms of like it's really about consideration. It's like in that awareness consideration piece. It's where that customer, it doesn't quite know what they want to purchase, where they're searching around. And actually that's where most retailers want to be, don't they? They want to be in that consideration set. They want to be at that point when someone hasn't decided about the brand they're buying from potentially. So being able to be there more is just super powerful. And we see like new customer rates from CSS of being around like 60%, which is really high for the affiliate channel and for one publisher type. And when you start kind of like layering in those things, like better language around CSS, better ways we can explain it and explain the impact it does have on other channels, the ability to test it, and also the power it can deliver for retailers, and the fact that really big retailers, you know, like the likes of like Dunelms of this world, are happy to do things like CSS to run it alongside their PPC, and in fact invest in more of it, gives that proof of concept, in my opinion, for any retailer that's looking to adopt it and think about bringing it into their mix. It's powerful. It's a powerful partner.
I mean, we've seen similar things with some of the brands that we work with, in that the kind of consideration and awareness stage is becoming really important. And I think that's partly driven again by some of the consumer behaviour that we see, where actually the appetite or desire that consumers have to find the right product and get the best possible value means that actually that upper funnel journey is increasingly competitive, as you say, Rachel. And so actually CSS, and there are other models that can support a similar kind of tactic, but the idea that they are able to push out competitors and complement an existing brand strategy is definitely becoming increasingly important. And I think that's a really interesting model, and probably one that will kind of grow in terms of demand from brands, especially as we, you know, kind of navigate whatever economic challenges might impact retail over the next few months.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit then, because I mentioned towards the end of my slides that around about 13% of spend is now, I mean, and this potentially is inexact because it requires a lot of people to like fully understand what we mean by non-last click CPA, but we know there is a chunk of revenue there, and 13% is still a very significant amount of revenue overall, right? We're still talking about sort of 200 million pounds that is being spent on non-last click CPA activity through the channel. There's a question that's come in specifically around sort of brand building, and one thing that we did see, which is in the deeper report, which is actually we looked at the cost per sale across retail for all different affiliate types, and it kind of plays out how you might think, in that the earlier funnel stuff, the cost per sale is more expensive. It comes out considerably more expensive than the cheapest affiliate types. But to Rachel's point around the sort of 60% new customer acquisition, how much is this sort of, in your experience or conversations you've had with brands, is this sort of feeding into an evolution of the channel beyond just last click CPA? And did you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, I mean, look, ROI overall was 16-1. I think the ROI for categories like editorial content was 8-1. So, and when you look at the CPS stuff, you'll see obviously the categories that you would expect to be more associated with upper funnel engagement, like CSS, editorial content, are more expensive. And I think the two things, the non-CPA point and the desire for the channel to do more to engage customers at the very earliest point, you know, when they're making decisions about brands and products tying together. I would like to see the amount of spend towards non-CPA or mechanisms away from CPA grow. We didn't capture this in this report, although there is some data in it that was done from last year about affiliates and the different payment mechanisms they use. I think tenancy probably still forms the large part of that non-CPA bucket. And I think if we're going to do more to help brands work smarter with with affiliates that can engage customers higher up the funnel, we will need probably some of that non-CPA stuff to grow beyond 15%. And we will also need it to probably move away from a little bit of tenancy and into some other variable performance related metrics like CPC. That if you look at trying to engage different editorial content sites or editorial content networks, you're generally doing that on a CPC. So keeping the mechanism as performance based as possible, but perhaps moving it away a little bit from tenancy to ensure that the brands feel that they are, they're receiving return on the investment. One of the things about that CPS stuff, social content is quite low. So content creators, editorial content was quite high. So the average about £4.34, 35, I think. And the editorial content stuff was up towards £5 CPS, and social content influencers was lower than the average, which I found quite surprising. I found everything in this report about social content and influencers quite surprising. Pretty low contribution, 6%. I think people would have thought that would be higher overall. Pretty low year-on-year growth, 1%. And CPS is lower than the average, which says to me that we're probably not working smart enough with that publisher type. And certainly I think we find it very difficult to invest budget properly in that publisher type, and I thought those CPS stats bore that out.
Still a bit of a square peg round hole.
It really is, and I was surprised to see the data really kind of underscore that, if I'm honest. I thought the contribution would be a lot higher. I thought the growth would be a lot higher, particularly the growth. Actually, I was quite surprised about that.
I feel like some of that maybe comes down to budgets in channel as well, and going back to this ROI point for the channel too, because I certainly know that when we're managing budgets, we don't get huge amounts of fixed budgets to do things like big influencer investments and investment in influencer partners. I see what the budgets other teams get, like in-house influence teams and PR teams, but that doesn't translate into the affiliate channel. And I think sometimes it's challenging then to get the budget because the channel's measured on an ROI so heavily. Still, the narrative is very ROI, and it's around that language there, and that change of shift is hard because the affiliate manager or the affiliate channel is typically targeted on delivering sales. So it can then be really difficult to go, can I have this big chunk of budget that I will invest in these partners, but the metric is not sales on this occasion. Whereas other channels just don't, like a PR or an influencer team just don't have to justify it in the same way, maybe.
So maybe we should stop bragging about the ROI thing, because ultimately the ROI point's being driven by some affiliate types and not others. And we tell we always say we're quite bad at storytelling in this intro. I don't think that's really true. I think sometimes we tell the wrong story. We tell an ROI story, but we also want to tell an upper funnel engagement story, and the two things just don't chime together properly.
I like sorry,
go ahead, Rachel.
I was just going to say I like a blended ROI story. I like to look at the channel as a whole, but communicate that there's different partners within it that will have different KPIs and different ROI, but it will ladder up still a really good strong ROI, because if you're working really effectively with CSS and incentive sites, they will deliver you a brilliant ROI that should help you to still invest in content and influencers, and your top line will still come out looking great. It's maybe about not having to judge every single thing that tracks through the affiliate channel as having a high ROI. But
that's exactly the point that I was going to speak to. I think increasingly with our brands, we're in a position where we are able to work with them at what is an effective CPA or an effective ROI, so that we're not tied to a fixed commission payout per channel or per model. It's very much about what the overall goal is. And so I think that might be the reason that we're seeing this slow but steady increment in these more fixed or non-CPA spends, because it is increasingly a way of proliferating the models that brands are able to use without risking measurement. And the other thing that I have found more recently, I suppose, in the last quarter, maybe half year, is around brands being challenged because of economic pressures, considering how budget is being stripped back from certain channels, and those that are less measurable, influencer, for example, if they've been managing that in-house, that can be at risk. And so actually, if there is a way that they can work in those channels, but with some greater visibility and greater kind of performance metrics, then that also, I think, is starting to shift some of that budget into the affiliate kind of network and platform space. Because even though the outcome isn't paid on a cost per sale, there is a measurability and a transparency around performance that they may not get if they're running it in-house. And so that, I think, has been a sort of an interesting glimmer of perhaps a change in thinking. And so I wonder if, this time next year, that growth trajectory will be greater than than we've seen in previous.
So probably a point to make for everyone's reference about we're saying here that we don't seem to be very good at spending budget in the right ways. One of the things that I took away from the report was that the AOV, across the board is quite static, and yet, spend is going up. So you would assume, therefore, that advertisers are making conscious decisions to invest more money in the channel, because they want to spend more money in the channel. So, although we're saying maybe that, we're not always great at having places to spend budget, and I think that sometimes is a problem, or spending budget in the right ways, advertisers are clearly making conscious decisions to spend more money with affiliate marketing, because if the AOVs are static and spend's going up at a faster rate than revenue, you would assume that it's about conscious decisions to spend more.
And the point you previously made, and around the cost per sale, when we looked at it, we only really had a really deep dive into it from a retail perspective. But the difference between the cheapest affiliate type and the most expensive is a 66% variance there. And so it could be that we've been hearing a lot over the last sort of 2 to 3 years. We've known for years and years and years that brands want to invest in early funnel, but it's just felt as though the channel isn't necessarily well placed to reward that activity. And it does feel that there's been a gear change over the last couple of years to want to try and actually find solutions to be able to do that more. So perhaps it is indicative of that, because, as I say, you will find towards those more expensive affiliate types that they are the earlier funnel that is the earlier funnel activities. I'm just wondering whether that, and also one other point, which when we ask networks for their data, I'm very conscious of the fact that if you give people these vast spreadsheets, it's very off-putting and very time consuming. But it would be really interesting to see, which we don't have, by sector or by affiliate type, where we are seeing non-last clicks spike.
Agreed. The one thing I would always say about when you look at affiliate type data in anything really of these type of pieces of work, where you're taking data from across the industry, obviously some affiliate models are very, very predicated on one particular sector. Others are obviously sector ubiquitous, like cashback, obviously, which can work with all sectors. I would say CSS is quite constrained to retail on the whole. The tech partner growth that we saw was very specific to finance, although of course tech partners can work across all sectors. So when you're reviewing the affiliate data and you're thinking about which ones are up and which ones are down and their overall share, always think that like telcos, sometimes you can't do a lot of of some particular models in telcos. Telcos is a big spending part of this industry, so I always think about that when I look at some of the data. I mean, the sub-network thing that we were talking about earlier, sub-networks are a ubiquitous affiliate type that do work across all different sectors, which will undoubtedly help their ability to grow. CSS have got to work a little bit harder for that growth if they can only really generate that growth in retail.
Just coming back to, because we didn't really cover it off when we were talking about the affiliate growth and decline, we've seen a 7% drop in spend, albeit from a high level in terms of what we would broadly consider voucher, coupon, etc., versus an 18% increase in sub-network. And we know that affiliate classification is problematic. We know that there is crossover between those two categories. So do we feel that there's an element of displacement happening here?
I think vouchers do suffer from that issue I just said. Vouchers' share of telcos is much lower than vouchers' share of retail. So telcos is a big spending market. So that will be an issue for sure. Obviously, the Google have played a part in that. Site. Although actually, I think that the site reputation abuse stuff that happened last year is very, very it's very cut and dry. So vouchers going down because gone down 7% because Google are not ranking them in the SERPs as much. But I think ultimately that diverted sales to other affiliate or other websites. It didn't take sales, I don't think, away from the discount code market. I would say maybe it changed investment from the category that we call discount code into the category that we call sub-network, because some of those voucher sites that listed in the SERPs would be categorized as discount code sites, and some of the the sites that maybe took those sales are now categorized as sub-network sites. I must admit, I'm not sure that necessarily the Google site reputation abuse thing took spend away from discount coding. I think it just moved it around, and maybe it then becomes a sort of categorization problem.
Well, let's talk about that categorization problem then, because it's something that I've been conscious of for years, and it seems to be that, again, it's starting to proliferate as a conversation. How how hampered are we in terms of how we talk about our channel and how we report success within our channel around the fact that we still force affiliates to choose a primary promotional method that isn't necessarily reflected? It's the sort of like who I am rather than what I do conversation. How hampered are we in terms of that?
Well, I think if you're talking at a very high level, then it's not massively restrictive. Potentially, sometimes it's a little misleading, but I think the challenges really come when you get to this level of kind of data analysis and wanting to understand the specifics of what is driving results and the kind of the process behind that. And so I think without a kind of consistent taxonomy, it's very difficult for both partners and brands to really understand how to get the best from the channel and the players within it. And so I think it's becoming increasingly limiting. I think the other point I would make is that with regards to kind of partner classification and the challenges there, I think it's important to make a distinction about what value add a partner offers to a consumer as a model versus the promotional methods they use in order to gain those consumers, because I think those things are helpful distinctions. Clearly a cashback site is an easy example. To a consumer, the benefit is that they offer cashback for purchases, but in terms of how they acquire those customers in the first place, they will be using a plethora of channels from TV through to paid search and everything else. And so I think that kind of distinction or that approach may be a more helpful view, but also is complex because it's layered. So I don't know the answer, but I think it's one we need to.
I agree that the self-categorization thing probably needs to go away. Obviously my background's from a network, and I think generally speaking, we always try to interfere manually in the self-classification element because that was important. I still fundamentally believe that the vast majority of affiliate businesses have one primary way of one primary reason for offering something to a consumer, and that should be the basis for their classification. I don't necessarily buy into this idea that there's like lots of different media touch points around a particular affiliate business, and therefore that makes categorization complex. I think the vast majority of affiliate businesses have mostly one way of engaging a customer, and that should be the basis of their classification. I think one of the challenges is when that classification really fundamentally changes. Like you've got traditionally a discount orientated business that then decides to implement a loyalty component, and that loyalty component then becomes as important to the consumer as the discounts that they might be able to get. I'm not sure how you really categorize that. Maybe they'll ultimately all be a category that for, I don't know, like the everything app or something. I don't know.
You can also change your attribution rules or how you operationally.
Yeah, I've never seen affiliate categorization as a really challenging issue outside of where you've got many businesses sitting under one umbrella, like the sub-network element. And, I think, again, some of the reason for growth in sub-networks is because, Google has listed media houses, much more significantly than independent content over the last year. But that then gets conflated with the voucher point that we spoke about before, and then other, sort of things on top of that. And then it becomes very, very difficult to have this conversation and really understand why sub-networks have been growing at 18% year on year. So I think that's where the categorization just gets really challenging.
Yeah, I would say when I look at categorization from a network point of view, I ignore it most of the time. Okay to say that? I completely ignore it. Sorry, being honest. I don't think it causes challenges, but I think it can cause I talk to retailers all the time about the channel, trying to educate them on the channel, educate them what the channel can do. And I think it can be confusing if you're a retailer trying to understand that you don't know all the nuances of different partner types. You think something you approved is this, and then it is something else, and then it's not what you wanted it to be. And, I think it creates a bit of distrust. It creates a bit of like, I don't know what I'm doing sometimes in terms of the channel, which is one of the main reasons I kind of ignore it. And I try and paint the picture of what is actually happening. And I do the same thing with sub networks. Like, we'll try and work out what's going under, what's tracking underneath there. And if it's content, I won't call it a sub network. I will bucket into that upper funnel content, PR, skim links piece. And if it's voucher, rather than saying sub network, I call it voucher. Like, if I believe that a sub network is pretty much 90% voucher sales, I put it under a voucher categorization, because it's the reality of what it is. The sub network is the mechanism, but the activity is still coming through voucher, and it's coming through voucher led traffic. And I think that's really important, because most of the conversations we have with retailers at the moment is wanting to understand what more they can do in the channel, wanting to talk about how they can reach more customers, and wanting to make sure that they're spending their money in channel in the most effective way. And for me, that's about having balanced programs, and that doesn't need to be excluding one partner type, but it is probably being conscious of where that partner type is accessing your program and how much of that partner type you have, to ensure that you're just kind of getting the most out of everything. And I think that's where the sub network bit does cause more of a challenge for advertisers or brands, because it's hard to know what it is ultimately. And like, we all here probably do know what it is, but if you're just a retailer logging in and you just see my name in a report that's growing like 90% year on year, it is hard to know where that's coming from, and to kind of think what that data is and what the contribution is.
So just on the just on sub networks, so for those people listening in that are unaware, we last week, the week before last, sorry, we published a sub networks guide. And what was really interesting to me, I'm having not been network side for a couple of years, I kind of have to rely on people telling me what's going on. And what was really surprising to me is working with that project team around our guide to sub networks, was how many there are now. When we did an initial piece of work about 6 years ago, where we went out to the major sub networks to understand how they operated and what they worked around, what they offered in terms of transparency, there were 7, and we went out to more than 45 this time round. So I think that is partly obviously explainable in the 18% growth we're seeing those sub networks coming in from overseas. But it was really interesting to see that. And if people are challenged with sub networks, then that guide is available to access for free from the APMA website. I just wanted to cover off, I'm conscious of time, so I just wanted to cover, someone's asked a question which I'll just answer directly, which is, did you ask what number of brands are investing outside of last click CPA? There must be brands that only spend on CPA, but then others are spending more than 13%. Yeah, that will be the case. We didn't ask that question. We didn't go into that level of granularity. Last year, we asked a qualitative survey where we did ask brands what percentage of their spend was going through CPA and non-last click CPA. That's available in last year's report, but we also included a screen grab in this year's when we were talking about that issue, so you can find out some more information about that. So we're coming to the end of the discussion. We've got about 5 minutes left. So what I wanted to do was ask all 3 of you. So we've done this again in 12 months' time, hopefully in a slightly less frenetic and chaotic way, and giving ourselves a little bit more time to put all the data together. So 12 months goes by really, really quickly. So we're not necessarily expecting kind of, massive kind of shifts or changes, but what would you expect to see in 12 months' time that we're not currently seeing? Or it could just be an evolution of what we're currently seeing. Cara, I'll come to you first.
Well, I think for me, the thing that's been striking is around the kind of the change in investment in those affiliate models. So I think we're going to see a continuation of that. But particularly, I wonder if, in the way that we've seen a bit of decline in spend in the voucher code channel, in a year from now, will we see a bit of a decline in spend within the content channel? And I think part of that might be driven by AI and the overviews that are increasingly taking up search result space. I think that's going to start to erode some of the direct traffic for that channel relatively quickly. So that's a bit of a concern, but that's my kind of prediction, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's really interesting.
Anything else, Anne? Surprisingly quick.
No, can I not just agree with that? What do I think's gonna? I mean, I actually think that the thing will be interesting to see, right? So, cashback and loyalty is the biggest affiliate type. It's almost 30% of the total investment. It still grew, by I think about 7% year on year, and it feels like we're almost doubling down on the cashback and loyalty sector. They've now got the consent exemption for their cookie, the only affiliate type to really have that exemption. I had a really interesting conversation this morning with somebody that I think is on this call, but who's to remain nameless, about whether that creates two-tier affiliate marketing. That's definitely the next panel we want to do. But what does that look like? I would assume that based on that set of circumstances, that we would expect cashback to be a bigger part of the channel next year, and the growth will be double digit. It should, because they've now got an exemption for tracking or consent that will improve their ability to track in a way that won't be available to other affiliates at the moment. So that would be interesting to see what happens there. Now, how quickly that's being rolled out and whether that will have full impact, I think it will probably be largely rolled out by Q4. So realistically, in the data for next year, we should see those cashback numbers get bigger.
Great.
Well, I'm going to say, I want to say like the number of retailers is going to increase. I think current trends are going to continue. I think people turn into the channel, diversifying their mix is going to continue. And I think affiliates has a real opportunity to take a slice of that. I generally do think it does. I think it's really interesting conversations I'm having now, and more of them than I ever have, where I used to maybe sometimes tag on to other channel pitches. I am now sometimes the lead channel pitch of what someone wants to turn to us to. And I think that's really cool, and that's really positive, and something we should absolutely celebrate and kind of champion. I think we're going to see more kind of CPC. I think link B is going to really continue to rise and increase this year. I think it's a really interesting way of being able to do kind of really great editorial stuff with a performance element in channel. And I just see more and more retailers turn into that, as well as some of the kind of CPC influencer network stuff as well. It was talked about loads at Affili Fest too, when brands were on stage talking about how they do content, the people who were really successful in doing content in the channel and really push for it. We're talking about how they use CPC payments for influencers. They're not doing fixed fees. They're trying to create CPC models. And I do feel that might create a bit of energy and a bit of continuum, because it is a way of being able to keep some of the performance elements that we love about the channel, but also make some of those upper funnel pieces that we're challenging with big fixed fee payments more accessible to more retailers, and a more interesting space for people to play.
Yeah, I think bringing that to life could be one of the keys to unlocking additional budgets as well. I mean, one point that's just come to mind, I think I've got this right, is from the report when we talk about the coming back to the earlier point you raised, Carla, around the revenue that is from the ad spend survey and how we're bigger than these different industries. I included audio podcasting in it, and I think my rough calculation in my head is that more money is spent on non-last click CPA activity through the affiliate channel than is spent on audio podcasting in the UK. And the fact is that we kind of know it, we see it floating around, but we haven't really kind of anchored that properly. So perhaps that's the story that we need to tell in the next 12 months. Okay, so thank you all for just before everybody leaves, I want to say a huge thank you to Carla, Rachel, and Ant. I just wanted to finish off with a couple of follow-ups from me. So the State of the Affiliate Nation guide is available. There's a free 6 or 7 page version which you can download from the website now. Just brief mention on a couple of initiatives. I mentioned the sub-networks guide. We also have a payments guide as well, which is free to download. That takes you from the point of sale to the point of payment and explains how all of the different networks, we've got 11 different affiliate networks in there, about how they handle affiliate payments. It's a really comprehensive, really useful guide. If you're interested in joining the APMA, then please go to the website, join the movement, shape the standards, help us to lead the growth. And if anyone is interested in coming along to the next meeting or dialing into the next meeting, please drop me an email. The next meeting is on the 16th of July at 3 o'clock, it's Wednesday. And drop me an email and we'll make sure that you get an invite. We'll also post details of that meeting on the website shortly. But thank you all for joining me today. I hope you found it useful. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.